It's time to gauge Calvin Ridley's impact on the future of the Jacksonville Jaguars. We'll do it in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars.
You are Locked On Jaguars, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, y'all, I'm Tony Wiggins. Thank you for joining me on the Locked On Jaguars podcast, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. And we thank you for making us your first listen. I have to remind you that we are free on all platforms. Wherever you get your podcasts, you'll find us, and you don't have to pay for it. And I'm going to also let you know that we're on YouTube. Make sure you like and subscribe to YouTube page. Hello to all our new listeners as well. We're grateful to have you here. You are multiplying this podcast by the day, and we are absolutely appreciative of that. Today's show is sponsored by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. Let's talk about what a lot of people are talking about around Jacksonville, and that is I wouldn't say potential, but the probable and likely addition of wide receiver Calvin Ridley this offseason whenever the league decides that they are going to reinstate him from a gambling suspension. The trade was done the day of the trade deadline. Trent Baalke, and of course, I know Doug Pederson had something to do with it, put their 2 cents in and made a trade that a lot of us did not expect. Sent a bunch of conditional picks. Won't go through the whole thing right now for you. For Calvin Ridley, who was sitting out this year and will have like an $11 million cap hit for the Jaguars next season. Everyone thinks it's a genius move. So first, let's talk about Mr. Ridley and what he brings to the table. He's a legitimate NFL receiver, having had 49 career starts, 248 receptions for 3,300 yards, 28 touchdowns. It's pretty dang good for Calvin Ridley. And it is expected because what he did was Calvin Ridley was a guy who was the heir apparent in Atlanta to Julio Jones. He came along when Julio Jones was still in his prime, so he was the number 2 guy. And eventually most people thought at some point he would be the number 1 because, well, Julio Jones had started to show signs of getting older. So, and Ridley's about 6'1", maybe a little bit over 6 feet tall, goes about $190. Is considered a guy who can really, really get after you with his speed. In 2020, had a career year of 90 receptions for 1,374 yards with 9 touchdowns, averaged 15 yards a catch. Only played 5 games in 2021 where he had 31 catches for 281 yards with 2 touchdowns, and then, of course, did not play at all in 2022. There's a question about, I don't think it's that big of a deal, but there's a question like, what will he be coming back off a suspension? We've seen guys come off of injuries, and they're fine. So he hasn't been injured, right? And Lil Birdie told me that he is in tip-top shape, and he is absolutely ready to go. So can a guy who only had 1,000-yard season in his entire career, and prior to the 90 catches he had in 2020, in the other 4 years, his previous high was 64 catches. Now, mind you, he did that as a rookie and had 10 touchdowns. So Calvin Ridley came right into the National Football League and immediately started. And this was when Julio was still the number 1. He immediately had an impact in the NFL. So he's kind of like that Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave dude who was ready to go from day one. All of that to say this, I think he'll be ready to go on day one here in Jacksonville whenever the league allows him to start playing for the Jaguars. So there's some things we're going to go through, right? First of all, what do the Jags expect to get out of Calvin Ridley? 2, How does it affect Trevor Lawrence? And then 3, in segment 3, is it enough or do they need to double down on it, go to the well, tap in even more, and add yet another? And I'll tell you who that piece is, because there's some rumors that one of Trevor Lawrence's college teammates may be available via trade. So it's something that we should probably all address. So what are they getting in Calvin Ridley? I think they're getting a dude that is a relative burner. He's not a track dude, but he's certainly a deep threat. I don't think we need to be totally obsessed with chasing track stars and speed the way Urban Meyer was in order to be good. It's nice that Miami has 2 speed guys, but then folks can say, well, they don't have a size guy, right? Are T. Higgins and Jamar Chase fast enough that those guys look like they're pretty good, right? A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. There's enough speed to go around. And I know they have Zach Pascal in the slot in Philly, but anybody thinking about that? They're thinking about those 2 dudes that start. You get a good enough football player and you can win, because those guys can win in short spaces and route running. I think Calvin Ridley, to go with the other 2 that we're looking at, of course, we're talking about Christian Kirk and Zay Jones. Calvin Ridley's plenty fast enough for the Jaguars to not be considered a team that does not have speed. So as opposed to focusing on a speed guy, I think he gives them, first of all, when he comes here, he's the alpha. I think it makes them team-wise plenty enough fast in order to say that they don't lack team speed, especially with Travis Etienne at running back and Evan Ingram, if he's re-signed, as at tight end. So that being said, the Jaguars are getting a very good player who can eat the entire route tree up. Would it be nice to have a catch radius guy? A little bit, but I'd rather have a guy who can get open, because we have a quarterback who can take advantage of him being open. So we'll discuss how it helps the rest of the receivers and see whether or not it's going to be enough. And if it's not, what should the Jaguars do? Discuss all of that with you here on Locked On Jaguars after I let you guys know about our sponsor for the day, and that is LinkedIn. That's right. We are so proud that LinkedIn is the sponsor of today's show. As a small business owner of hiring manager, and the person who's responsible for hiring, you know that success in 2023 all depends on the team members you surround yourself with. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. With LinkedIn Jobs, you can hire qualified candidates more efficiently by matching open roles with people who have the skills, values, experiences to help you achieve your goals. Happened to me when I was in the barbershop. Needed to fill the post, put my expectations out there, hooked up with LinkedIn, and boom, just voila, I got all of these great applicants, and you can do the same thing, because LinkedIn helps you quickly attract qualified candidates to your open jobs with targeting tools that go above and beyond resume data by using insights from your job post, company, and their 875 million member profiles to put your post in front of the most qualified candidates. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to, and faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl, one word, to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. And we are grateful that you have joined us here on Locked On Jaguars. New listeners, old listeners, same listeners, antique listeners. We are so happy to have you all. And it's growing by the day. And we appreciate you making us your first listen, because here at the Locked On Podcast Network, it is your team every day. So we discussed Calvin Ridley and some of his individual skill sets. Any concerns about him not being ready to go? Let me hit on this real quick. Any character concerns? Do I have any character concerns for a guy that made a bet? I think the bet was like $1,000 that the Falcons were going to beat the Jaguars in 2021. No, I mean, he's learned this lesson. I'm not on the surface going to tell you that it's dumb, because one, you can't do it, and to do it anyway. So sometimes people say where there's smoke, there's fire. Like, If you know he's not supposed to do it, why would he risk losing millions of dollars just to do it? It doesn't make sense. It has to be something that is a problem. I don't subscribe to that. I just think he thought it was something that wasn't a big deal and that he could pull it off and get away with it and have some fun. You can't do it. Do I think Calvin Ridley is going to be Art Schlichter where he's going to keep gambling on games? No, I do not. I do not expect that that's going to be a problem. I also don't expect him to come out and openly speak against him being suspended. This is one of the things you kind of need to just suck up and understand. Look, there's a bigger picture here. If you play the games, you can't gamble on sports, right? And you know it. The reason why is because the one thing the NFL has going for it is without regard to what Arian Foster was talking about, is that it's rigged. It's not rigged. It's not WWE. The outcome isn't, you can't mix that up and gambling and then expect Congress with your antitrust exemption to not pay attention to you if the participants who play in the game are gambling. You just can't do it. It's impossible. So you have to be smart and you have to understand. Now, I know that there's some kind of G code and there's probably a few members of society, friends of mine, family members that are like, oh, come on, Wig, you know it ain't a big deal. This ain't that common sense type thing, though. This is business. And in business, there's some things that you just have to adhere to, especially when you're making millions of dollars. So I don't think it's going to be of a problem, but I had to do and say all of that stuff just for housekeeping purposes. But no, I do not expect Calvin Ridley is going to be some degenerate gambler. I don't. So I think it was a good move by the Jaguars. I think the compensation is fine. I think he's going to help this football team. The reason why is it's going to help Zay Jones and Christian Kirk get open. It's going to help the running game, and it's going to help take some more pressure off Trevor Lawrence. Christian Kirk earned a lot of respect from a lot of people this year. Calvin Ridley already has that respect from those people. So now you have two of them. And Zay Jones is better than a lot of people thought he was. And when I say people, I'm talking about players and coaches and folks around the league, because those guys, including Evan Ingram, all had career years here under Doug Pederson. Now imagine what Doug Pederson can do with this offense with Calvin Ridley. Imagine how all of this works when you can just throw the ball to a guy and he can take that thing all the way from just a hitch pass. That's what they have in this young man. And I'm really, really looking forward to it. And I think it's going to really work out for the Jacksonville Jaguars because it's going to help everyone else get better. They're just going to be able to run their offense in a very, very true nature, in a very true form. And everyone is going to benefit from another player with that caliber. That is a Pro Bowl level wide receiver. And I said it early in a podcast earlier last year, those guys don't grow on trees. You're not just going to find those people just hanging out. You're either going to have to trade for them, give up a lot of compensation, or both, and then pay them a boatload of money. Calvin Ridley getting in trouble is like a blessing to Jacksonville because they're really getting a guy like that for what I would consider a bargain. And it's at the right time for this team. And they didn't use any resources like their high draft picks and all of those things. So all of the draft picks are conditional. And I absolutely love it. It's not going to affect the draft in this year. It's going to affect the draft in subsequent years. And who knows? Even if it affected this year's draft and they had to give up a second-round pick, it's a late second-round pick, unlike those picks used to be at the top of the third round or each round for Jacksonville. That is absolutely not the case anymore. So is that enough? Is that enough or enough? However you want to say it. Not for me, it isn't. I'll tell you exactly why it's not for me. Just a second here on Locked On Jaguars. Go to TurboTax and don't do your taxes. Meet with an expert who will do them for you. TurboTax experts can relieve you from the stress of taxes and file for you so you can do not taxes. Show your eyes things that are not taxes. Unpack a moving box or not taxes. Taste, not taxes. Sing, not taxes, a lullaby. Hope, not taxes, sleeps through the night. Grab a saddle and ride, not taxes, into the sunset. With TurboTax, an expert will do your taxes from start to finish, ensuring your taxes are done right, guaranteed, so you can relax. Feels good to be done with your taxes, doesn't it? Come to TurboTax and don't do your taxes. Visit TurboTax.com to learn more. Intuit TurboTax, full service products only, video meeting while expert does your taxes required. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. And I guarantee you're going to love this last segment here of the Locked On Jaguars podcast, because you make it your first listen every day. And we thank you again for making us your team every day. Subscribe to the Locked On NFL podcast and get your daily conversations on the biggest NFL stories league-wide, plus in-depth analysis on the biggest games with NFL key predictions every Friday. And Monday, local insiders cover the weekend with game-to-game episodes. Locked On NFL, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. And you will see my mug on there every Wednesday with James Rapine, my partner and my brother from another mother. All right, so we talked about Calvin Ridley, the likelihood that he's a member of the Jaguars next year, the impact that he'll have, how he'll help everyone else. Now, is that enough, knowing the best case scenario that he comes in, is a 1,000-yard receiver, everybody, the offense blossoms? Is it enough? When you have a young quarterback like Trevor Lawrence, and you also have a salary cap, and you have to be very judicious in how you allocate those funds throughout the roster, is the addition of Calvin Ridley the best version of him in our minds? Is that enough? Yes, on the surface, it absolutely is. But I saw something very intriguing today. We said you don't have to worry about track stars and catch radius is nice to have. There's a rumor that T. Higgins may be on the block because they don't think they can pay him, and then end up subsequently paying Joe Burrow, and then end up paying Jamar Chase, that T. Higgins may put them in a situation where they have to move on. Would you? Would you? Boy, I got to think about it real hard. But yeah, I would probably say I would. I would. And y'all going to get mad at me because you say, how many balls they got? I would. It just might include not only draft picks, but I might have to send a receiver back to him. Don't get mad at me, but I'm not trading Christian Kirk, and I'm not trading Calvin Ridley. I don't necessarily want to trade Zay Jones, but if it means me getting T. Higgins and having to pay him a bunch of money, and then deciding that your fourth receiver, who's Zay Jones, is going to be making $7 million, I might tell him, hey man, we'll send you Zay Jones back. You saw what he can do. Let him be Jamar Chase's number 2 or the number 3. It'll alleviate the fact that we now have 4 receivers making at least $7 million. But would you trade Zay Jones? And I know y'all getting sick of me trying to get rid of all. I'm not trying to get rid of anybody. This just comes up, and I'm saying, would you do it? Yeah, I would take a look at it. But it wouldn't just be a first-round pick. I would have to say, what if we sent you Zay Jones in a second-round pick? Would you take it? Or if they want a first-round pick and then find somebody else. I don't want to break these guys up, but man, I would almost say let's just get T. Higgins and keep Zay Jones, keep all 4 of them, but the league just doesn't work that way, man. The league doesn't work that way. This is a business, and it is a cutthroat business, and it is a hard business. I would not forsake maximizing Trevor Lawrence while he's here I wouldn't forsake that just to protect the feelings of people, because those feelings will heal real well if the Jaguars go to the Super Bowl. The Jaguars with T. Higgins, Calvin Ridley, and Christian Kirk, and Travis Etienne. Oh my God. What? It's kind of a no-brainer. You do it. you do it. Or you'd have to really tie yourself into the bedpost and tell people don't let you out of the house or anywhere near a computer if you're Trent Baalke, and until he's moved to somewhere else. Hell yeah, it's tempting. It's super tempting. Of course it is. What are you talking about? But is it enough already the way it is? Sure, it's enough. Use those funds and spread those funds out somewhere else. Build those trenches up, get more pass rush, get you a bona fide corner. The thing is though, they don't have to do all of this stuff in one place. They don't have to do it all in free agency. Don't have to do it all in the draft. They got both of those things. And then the third thing is you can make moves and do it a different way. Until we win a championship, there's never too many weapons. You never have too many weapons. You never have too much skill. You never have too much. It's a no-brainer if you don't have Calvin Ridley. If you don't have Calvin Ridley, you give him a first and a fourth round pick. By having Calvin Ridley, and this is the impact that he has had on this team, you don't have to do anything. If you do it, it's just going to be a plus to go over the top and be over the top good, where right now you're just okay. If they had T. Higgins on this team to go with everything else, best case scenario, they're really ready to go. They go from being somewhere in the 20s with weapons. They go, especially with what Trevor Lawrence is expected to do, they go to being a top 8, top 7, top 8 offense in the NFL, that when they walk out of that tunnel every week, DBs are scared and defensive coordinators are frightened at the possibilities of what they could do. So, in a nutshell, Calvin Ridley is super important. The idea of having Calvin Ridley is important. It's important for secondary reasons, that he's going to help everybody else around him. And he's important that you don't have to make big decisions if the price gets too high. That's how important he is. If anything, he puts you closer and closer to winning the championship. And at the end of the day, that's what everybody wants, even here in Jacksonville. You guys make sure you have a great weekend. Take care of each other. We'll have more content. We're going to talk a lot about the Senior Bowl next week. Make sure you take care of each other. Until next time, Tony Wiggins with Locked On Jaguars.